March 15, 1962. The loading docks at Detroit's River Rouge steel plant stretch endlessly under gray industrial skies. Foreman Jack Sullivan checks his clipboard for the third time, squinting at numbers that don't make sense. 50,000 tons of finished steel beams need to reach the construction site of Chicago's new Willis Tower within 72 hours. The contract penalty for late delivery is catastrophic, $240,000, enough to bankrupt Sullivan's trucking company and destroy the careers of everyone involved. The mathematics are brutal. Standard 18-wheeler trucks can haul maximum loads of 40 tons each. 50,000 tons means 1,250 separate truck runs. Even working around the clock, the existing transportation infrastructure between Detroit and Chicago can handle maybe 300 trucks per day without creating traffic disasters. At current capacity, the delivery would take 4.5 days minimum. The construction schedule allows exactly 3 days. The gap between what's needed and what's possible seems insurmountable. Standing in the midst of this logistical nightmare is Harold Ray Kowalski, a 41-year-old independent truck driver from Hamtramck, Michigan. No engineering degree, no MBA, no corporate backing, just 23 years of experience hauling everything from automotive parts to industrial machinery across the Great Lakes region. His rig, a 1959 Peterbilt 351 with a custom-built trailer, sits among dozens of other trucks waiting for loading assignments. What the logistics experts at River Rouge don't know is that Kowalski has been studying this problem for weeks, not in conference rooms or planning meetings, but during late-night stops at truck stops, conversations with other drivers, and careful observation of traffic patterns between Detroit and Chicago. He's noticed something the transportation planners have missed, something that violates every established principle of long-haul trucking, but might be the only solution that works. The crisis began 3 weeks earlier when the original transportation contractor, Midwest Heavy Haul, suffered a cascade of equipment failures that left them with insufficient capacity to meet the deadline. Their fleet of specialized heavy-duty trucks, designed specifically for moving massive steel loads, had been decimated by mechanical breakdowns, accidents, and maintenance issues that no one anticipated. The construction project's general contractor, desperate to avoid delays that would cost millions in penalties and overtime, put out emergency bids to every trucking company in the region. Sullivan's Ace Transportation won the contract by promising the impossible. His bid assumed perfect weather, zero breakdowns, maximum legal loads, and coordination so precise it bordered on fantasy. Now, staring at the actual tonnage spread across acres of loading docks, Sullivan realizes he's committed professional suicide. The steel needs to move continuously, but his trucks can only make one round trip per day due to loading times, traffic congestion, and mandatory rest periods for drivers. The established industry practice for massive steel shipments follows predictable patterns. Large convoys of trucks depart at scheduled intervals, travel designated routes at regulated speeds, and arrive at destination sites according to predetermined timetables. This system works for normal loads distributed over weeks or months. It fails catastrophically when compressed into impossible deadlines. Sullivan has already contacted every available trucking company within 200 miles. The response is universally negative. Nobody has spare capacity. Nobody wants to risk their equipment on a job that seems designed to fail. Several competitors have privately told Sullivan he's insane for attempting it. The smart money says Ace Transportation will declare bankruptcy within a month. But Harold Kowalski approaches Sullivan with a proposal that defies everything the industry considers feasible. Instead of conventional convoy operations, Kowalski suggests a continuous flow system that treats the Detroit-Chicago route like a pipeline rather than a series of discrete shipments. Individual trucks would depart at precisely calculated intervals, travel at variable speeds optimized for traffic conditions, and coordinate through radio communication to maintain constant movement without the bottlenecks that destroy traditional convoy efficiency. The concept sounds simple until Sullivan examines the details. Kowalski has mapped every mile of highway between the steel plant and the construction site. He's identified optimal departure times that minimize traffic interference. He's calculated fuel consumption rates that allow drivers to maintain maximum legal speeds without running empty. Most importantly, he's figured out how to coordinate hundreds of independent drivers into a synchronized operation that functions like a single massive transportation machine. Sullivan's initial reaction is skepticism bordering on hostility. Kowalski's proposal requires abandoning decades of proven trucking methodology. It assumes drivers can maintain precise timing over 12-hour periods while adjusting to constantly changing road conditions. It demands radio coordination between trucks that have never worked together. Every transportation expert Sullivan consults declares the plan unworkable. The breaking point comes when Kowalski offers to demonstrate his method with a test run. 20 trucks, loaded with the first batch of steel beams, would depart using his continuous flow system. If the delivery succeeds without delays or accidents, Sullivan agrees to implement the method fleet-wide. If it fails, Kowalski accepts full responsibility for the lost time and damaged reputation. March 18, 1962. Dawn breaks cold and clear as 20 trucks line up at the River Rouge loading bays. Each driver has received detailed instructions from Kowalski about departure intervals, radio frequencies, and speed protocols. Most of them think the plan is crazy. Several have privately told their dispatch they expect to be involved in massive traffic accidents before reaching the Illinois border. The first truck, driven by veteran hauler Mike Castellano, rolls out at exactly 0600 hours, carrying 40 tons of structural steel. Instead of waiting for convoy formation, he immediately accelerates to highway speed and begins the journey south. 3 minutes later, the second truck departs, then the third. Instead of a traditional convoy bunched together for mutual support, Kowalski's system creates a stream of individual vehicles spaced across miles of highway. What happens next challenges every assumption about how heavy freight should move across American highways. The continuous flow eliminates the bottlenecks that plague conventional convoys. When the lead truck encounters traffic congestion, it doesn't force 19 other trucks to stop and wait. The following vehicles, spaced at calculated intervals, adjust their speeds to maintain optimal flow without creating traffic jams or forcing dangerous passing maneuvers. Radio communication between drivers allows real-time coordination that makes the entire operation function like a single organism. When Castellano reports construction delays near Kalamazoo, trucks 15 and 20 minutes behind him adjust their routes to alternate highways. When weather conditions change, the entire stream adapts instantaneously without stopping to reorganize. The conventional trucking wisdom says individual trucks are vulnerable to breakdowns, accidents, and navigation errors that convoys can support through mutual assistance. Kowalski's method proves the opposite. When truck number 7 suffers a mechanical failure near the Michigan-Illinois border, it pulls over without affecting the other 19 vehicles. The driver radios for roadside assistance while the continuous flow continues uninterrupted. By noon, the first test trucks are arriving at the Chicago construction site ahead of schedule. The unloading process, typically a chaotic bottleneck where multiple trucks compete for limited crane access, becomes smooth and efficient because vehicles arrive at precisely timed intervals rather than in overwhelming bunches. The construction foreman, expecting the usual convoy chaos, find themselves managing a steady stream of deliveries that matches their crane capacity perfectly. No waiting, no congestion, no crews standing idle while trucks bunch up and block each other's access to unloading zones. Sullivan, monitoring the operation from Detroit, watches his radio dispatchers coordinate the most complex trucking operation anyone has attempted in the Great Lakes region. The success of the first test run creates immediate problems Sullivan never anticipated. Word spreads through the trucking community like wildfire. By evening, drivers from competing companies are gathering at truck stops along Interstate 94, demanding explanations for how Ace Transportation suddenly achieved delivery speeds that violate basic physics. Several major shipping firms accuse Sullivan of falsifying delivery records. Others claim Kowalski's method creates dangerous highway conditions that will inevitably result in catastrophic accidents. The Michigan Department of Transportation receives 17 complaints within 24 hours. State officials launch an immediate investigation into what they term unauthorized convoy modifications that potentially endanger public safety. The pressure intensifies when Midwest Heavy Haul, the original contractor whose equipment failures created the crisis, files a formal complaint alleging that Ace Transportation is operating outside legal weight and safety parameters. But the numbers don't lie. 20 trucks delivered 800 tons of steel in 11 hours and 47 minutes, including unloading time. The same tonnage using conventional convoy methods would require 14 to 16 hours under optimal conditions. Kowalski's continuous flow system achieved a 37% efficiency improvement on the first attempt. Sullivan faces a decision that will define his company's future: expand the operation to handle the full 50,000-ton commitment, or retreat to conventional methods that guarantee contract failure. The safe choice means bankruptcy. The revolutionary choice means betting everything on a truck driver's untested theory. March 19, 1962, Sullivan commits to the impossible. 60 trucks will implement Kowalski's continuous flow system starting at dawn. The decision requires coordinating drivers from 7 different trucking companies, most of whom have never worked together. Radio frequencies must be allocated, departure schedules calculated to the minute, contingency plans developed for every conceivable breakdown scenario. The logistics prove staggering. Kowalski spends 18 hours straight creating detailed route maps for each driver, not just highway numbers and exit ramps, but precise timing charts that show when each truck should reach specific mile markers to maintain optimal flow, fuel stops coordinated so vehicles never bunch up at service stations, rest periods staggered to ensure continuous movement without violating federal driving time regulations. The established trucking industry watches with a mixture of fascination and horror. Veterans who have spent decades perfecting convoy operations see their expertise suddenly rendered obsolete by a method that shouldn't work but clearly does. Younger drivers, attracted by the efficiency gains, begin requesting transfers to companies willing to experiment with Kowalski's approach. The opposition intensifies when the Teamsters Union raises safety concerns. Union representatives argue that continuous flow operations place excessive pressure on individual drivers who lack the mutual support systems inherent in traditional convoys. They cite accident statistics showing increased risk when trucks operate independently rather than in coordinated groups. But Kowalski has anticipated these objections. His safety protocols actually exceed industry standards. Mandatory radio check-ins every 30 minutes, predetermined emergency procedures for mechanical failures, speed limits that prioritize safety over delivery time. The continuous flow method eliminates the convoy problems that cause most trucking accidents. No more dangerous passing maneuvers when slow trucks hold up entire formations. No more rear-end collisions when lead vehicles stop suddenly. No more jackknife situations caused by trucks following too closely in formation. The second day's operation launches with military precision. 60 trucks depart River Rouge at calculated intervals between 0530 and 0800 hours. Each driver carries detailed instructions about radio protocols, emergency procedures, and coordination requirements. The skeptics expect chaos, traffic disasters, equipment failures that cascade through the entire operation. Instead, something remarkable happens. The continuous flow achieves perfect synchronization. Trucks maintain optimal spacing without conscious effort. Radio communication creates a shared awareness that makes individual drivers function as components in a larger system. When traffic conditions change, the entire stream adapts organically. When mechanical problems occur, the system routes around failures without interruption. The highway patrol officers monitoring the operation report unprecedented efficiency. No traffic congestion, no unsafe passing, no convoy-related accidents that typically plague large trucking movements. The Michigan State Police radio dispatcher notes that 60 trucks moving in continuous flow create less traffic disruption than 20 trucks moving in traditional convoy formation. By afternoon, Chicago construction supervisors are calling Detroit to request acceleration of the delivery schedule. The steady stream of precisely timed arrivals allows crane operators to maintain peak efficiency without the delays caused by conventional batch deliveries. Construction productivity increases by 41% when materials arrive in continuous flow, rather than overwhelming surges followed by idle periods waiting for the next convoy. The transformation extends beyond mere efficiency improvements. Kowalski's method changes the fundamental relationship between transportation and construction. Instead of trucks serving construction schedules, the entire operation becomes integrated. Delivery timing matches construction capacity. Material flow synchronizes with building progress. The traditional boundaries between transportation and construction dissolve. Sullivan receives calls from construction companies across the Midwest requesting similar delivery services. Word has spread through the industry about Ace Transportation's revolutionary capability. Projects that seemed impossible due to transportation constraints suddenly become feasible. The company that faced bankruptcy 72 hours earlier now confronts more business opportunities than it can handle, but success creates new challenges. Kowalski's method requires drivers who understand systems thinking rather than individual truck operation. Not every experienced driver can adapt to continuous flow protocols. Some veteran haulers, comfortable with convoy traditions, struggle with the precise timing and constant radio coordination. The method demands a different type of professional skill. Training becomes crucial. Kowalski develops intensive programs that teach drivers to think systematically about their role in the larger transportation flow. Traditional trucking emphasizes individual vehicle performance. Continuous flow demands collective coordination. Drivers must learn to prioritize system efficiency over personal convenience. Radio discipline, timing precision, adaptive thinking that responds to changing conditions while maintaining overall flow integrity. The success attracts attention from unexpected sources. Military logistics officers begin studying Kowalski's method for potential applications in troop and supply movements. The continuous flow principles that work for steel transportation might revolutionize military convoy operations. Railroad companies express interest in hybrid systems that combine trucking flexibility with rail efficiency. Even maritime shipping firms investigate whether port-to-destination coordination could benefit from continuous flow concepts. The revolution accelerates when other trucking companies attempt to replicate Kowalski's results. Most fail catastrophically. The method looks simple but requires deep understanding of traffic dynamics, driver psychology, and system coordination that cannot be copied superficially. Success demands the same obsessive attention to detail that Kowalski developed through decades of experience. Several competitors hire industrial engineers to analyze and improve upon the continuous flow method. Their academic approaches consistently fail. The systems work only when designed by someone who understands trucking from the ground up. Engineering theory cannot substitute for practical knowledge gained through years of highway experience. By March 21st, ACE Transportation has delivered 37,000 tons of steel using continuous flow operations, 0 accidents, 0 delivery delays, 0 equipment failures that disrupted the system. The impossible contract that threatened bankruptcy has become the foundation for revolutionary change in American freight transportation. The success creates an unexpected problem that threatens to destroy everything Kowalski has built. On March 22nd, 3 major trucking unions file emergency injunctions claiming continuous flow operations violate collective bargaining agreements and endanger worker safety. The Teamsters argue that Kowalski's method eliminates traditional driver support systems, forcing individuals to operate in isolation without convoy protection. Union representative Frank Torino stands before federal mediators in Detroit, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in organized labor. This so-called innovation is nothing but speed up disguised as efficiency. These drivers are being pushed beyond safe limits to meet impossible deadlines. When accidents happen, and they will happen, blood will be on the hands of everyone who endorsed this reckless experiment. The legal challenge forces Sullivan to halt operations immediately. 60 loaded trucks sit idle on highway shoulders while lawyers argue about contract interpretations and safety regulations. Every hour of delay costs thousands of dollars in penalties. The construction project faces shutdown if steel deliveries don't resume within 24 hours. But Kowalski has been preparing for this confrontation since the first successful run. He's documented every aspect of continuous flow operations, proving that his method actually reduces driver stress and improves safety margins. The data shows that convoy operations force drivers into dangerous situations that continuous flow eliminates entirely. The federal hearing becomes a battleground between old-school transportation philosophy and revolutionary logistics thinking. Union attorneys cite decades of safety statistics proving convoy systems protect individual drivers through mutual support and coordinated movement. They argue that isolating drivers creates vulnerability to mechanical failures, medical emergencies, and highway dangers that convoys can address collectively. Kowalski's response dismantles these arguments with mathematical precision. He presents accident statistics showing that convoy operations cause more injuries per mile than individual truck movements. The close formation flying that unions consider protective actually creates chain reaction accidents when lead vehicles encounter unexpected obstacles. Trucks following too closely cannot react in time to avoid collisions. The continuous flow method eliminates these hazards by maintaining safe following distances and allowing each driver to respond independently to changing conditions. Radio communication provides better coordination than visual convoy signals. Precise timing reduces the pressure situations that cause driver fatigue and errors. The mediators face competing visions of transportation safety. Traditional convoy wisdom emphasizes collective protection through group movement. Kowalski's data proves that individual coordination through advanced communication creates superior safety outcomes. The old methods protect drivers from imaginary dangers while creating real ones. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a traffic safety researcher from Northwestern University, testifies as an expert witness. Her analysis of Kowalski's operations reveals counterintuitive results that challenge fundamental assumptions about trucking safety. Individual trucks maintaining precise spacing and constant communication achieve accident rates 67% lower than comparable convoy operations. The breakthrough moment comes when Mitchell presents simulation data showing how convoy accidents cascade through entire formations, while continuous flow accidents remain isolated events. A mechanical failure in truck position 7 of a 20-truck convoy affects all following vehicles. The same failure in continuous flow operations impacts only the individual truck, while the system routes around the problem automatically. Union attorneys struggle to counter Mitchell's scientific evidence with anecdotal arguments about driver solidarity and mutual support. Their case relies on emotional appeals about protecting workers rather than data about actual safety outcomes. The federal mediators recognize the difference between protective traditions and protective results. On March 23rd, the injunction is lifted with specific conditions. Continuous flow operations can resume immediately, but must include additional safety protocols that address union concerns. Mandatory radio check-ins increase from 30-minute to 15-minute intervals. Emergency response procedures must include specific protocols for driver medical issues and mechanical failures. Most importantly, drivers must receive formal training and certification before participating in continuous flow operations. Kowalski accepts these requirements because he's already implementing most of them. The additional protocols actually improve his system's reliability without compromising efficiency. The Union victory becomes a validation of continuous flow safety when properly managed. The resumed operations achieve even better performance than before the interruption. The additional safety measures create redundancies that prevent small problems from becoming major disruptions. 15-minute radio check-ins catch developing mechanical issues before they cause breakdowns. Enhanced emergency procedures build driver confidence that reduces stress and improves decision-making. By March 25th, the impossible delivery mission reaches completion. 50,000 tons of steel delivered in exactly 71 hours and 32 minutes. The contract deadline required 72 hours. Kowalski's continuous flow system finished with 28 minutes to spare, while maintaining perfect safety records and zero equipment failures. The construction site transformation is dramatic. Willis Tower's steel framework rises on schedule for the first time since construction began. Crane operators report unprecedented efficiency when materials arrive in steady streams rather than overwhelming batches. Construction productivity increases by 52% compared to conventional delivery methods. Sullivan's company evolution from near bankruptcy to industry leadership happens so rapidly it seems impossible. Ace Transportation receives contracts worth $12 million in the month following the Willis Tower delivery. Construction companies across the Midwest compete for access to continuous flow capabilities that make impossible projects feasible. The method's success attracts attention from transportation researchers worldwide. The University of Michigan's logistics department establishes a dedicated research program studying continuous flow principles. Graduate students analyze Kowalski's operational data to understand the mathematical relationships that make the system function. Professor James Crawford, who initially dismissed continuous flow as impractical, publishes papers crediting Kowalski with discovering fundamental transportation principles that academic theory had missed. The continuous flow method reveals that traffic optimization requires understanding driver psychology, vehicle dynamics, and communication systems as integrated components rather than separate variables. Industrial applications expand beyond trucking into manufacturing and supply chain management. Ford Motor Company adapts continuous flow principles to improve production line efficiency. The automotive industry discovers that Kowalski's transportation insights apply to assembly operations where timing and coordination determine overall productivity. Railroad companies begin experimenting with hybrid systems that combine continuous flow trucking with rail transportation. The seamless integration of different transportation modes creates efficiency gains that neither system achieves independently. Port authorities investigate similar applications for container shipping operations. The revolution spreads internationally when European transportation companies request licensing agreements for continuous flow technology. German Autobahn authorities conduct pilot programs testing whether high-speed continuous flow can reduce traffic congestion on heavily traveled routes. Japanese logistics firms study applications for just-in-time manufacturing systems. Opposition intensifies as traditional transportation companies realize that continuous flow represents an existential threat to established business models. Conventional trucking firms built around convoy operations face obsolescence unless they adapt quickly to new methods. Several major companies attempt hostile takeovers of firms that have successfully implemented continuous flow systems. The competitive pressure accelerates innovation as companies race to develop their own versions of Kowalski's method. Most attempts fail because they focus on superficial aspects like radio communication and departure timing, while missing the deeper understanding of traffic dynamics and driver coordination that makes the system function. Kowalski finds himself transformed from independent truck driver to transportation consultant as companies worldwide seek his expertise. The man who started with a single truck and an unconventional idea now influences logistics operations across multiple industries. His insights about continuous flow principles reshape thinking about efficiency, coordination, and system optimization. The success creates unexpected personal challenges. Kowalski struggles with the transition from hands-on driving to strategic consulting. His expertise comes from direct experience with highway conditions, vehicle behavior, and driver psychology. Managing corporate consulting contracts requires different skills that don't always align with his practical knowledge. The transformation continues as continuous flow principles influence urban planning and traffic management. City transportation departments study whether Kowalski's methods can reduce congestion on commercial routes. The insights that revolutionize long-haul trucking might solve metropolitan traffic problems that have resisted conventional solutions. The Willis Tower delivery that seemed impossible 8 days earlier becomes the foundation for transportation innovations that spread across industries and continents. One truck driver's refusal to accept limitations created methods that continue reshaping how goods, materials and people move through complex systems. The revolution that began with 50,000 tons of steel and an impossible deadline proves that the most significant innovations often come from practitioners who understand their work so deeply they can see possibilities that experts miss. The federal investigation that follows transforms Harold Kowalski from transportation innovator into reluctant industry pioneer. Department of Transportation officials arrive at River Rouge on March 26, armed with clipboards, stopwatches, and decades of regulatory experience that suddenly seems inadequate. Lead Inspector Catherine Walsh has overseen trucking safety compliance for 15 years. She's never encountered operations that achieve superior safety results while violating established protocols. Walsh's team spends 3 days analyzing every aspect of continuous flow operations. They measure following distances, record radio communications, interview drivers, and examine maintenance logs with forensic precision. Their mandate is simple: determine whether Kowalski's method represents genuine innovation or dangerous deviation from proven safety standards. The preliminary findings confuse everyone involved. Continuous flow operations demonstrate measurably superior performance across every metric the investigators can devise. Accident rates are lower, fuel efficiency is higher, driver fatigue indicators show improvement, equipment wear patterns suggest reduced mechanical stress. Even environmental impact assessments favor the new method over conventional convoy systems. Dr. Robert Hensley, the Transportation Department's chief safety analyst, admits privately to colleagues that the investigation has challenged fundamental assumptions about trucking regulations. The rules designed to protect drivers and highway safety appear to prevent exactly the innovations that could improve both. Regulatory compliance has become an obstacle to progress rather than a guarantee of safety. The bureaucratic response reveals institutional resistance to change that transcends individual personalities or agencies. Transportation regulations developed over decades reflect accumulated wisdom about convoy operations, weight limits, and driver scheduling. Kowalski's success suggests this wisdom might be incomplete or outdated, a possibility that threatens the expertise of thousands of transportation professionals. Regional trucking associations mobilize to oppose continuous flow adoption, arguing that unproven methods endanger established industry stability. Their opposition stems less from safety concerns than from economic anxiety about competitive advantages they cannot replicate. Companies built around conventional operations face potential obsolescence if continuous flow becomes standard practice. The political pressure intensifies when Congressman Harold Morrison, whose district includes several major trucking firms, calls for congressional hearings on transportation safety and innovation. Morrison's public statements emphasize protecting American jobs and maintaining proven safety standards, but his private conversations reveal concern about campaign contributions from threatened transportation companies. Kowalski finds himself testifying before a House subcommittee on transportation innovation and safety. The hearing room atmosphere is adversarial from the moment he sits at the witness table. Representatives who have never driven commercial vehicles question his qualifications to revolutionize an industry. Academic experts cite theoretical limitations of his practical methods. The confrontation peaks when Representative Angela Torres challenges Kowalski's credibility directly. "Mr. Kowalski, you're asking Congress to endorse transportation methods that contradict decades of engineering research and safety protocols. What qualifies a truck driver to redesign systems that trained professionals have developed through careful scientific analysis?" Kowalski's response cuts through academic pretension with practical clarity. "Representative, I've driven 3 million miles without a preventable accident. I've hauled everything from automobiles to industrial machinery across every highway in the continental United States. I understand how trucks behave in traffic, how drivers respond to stress, and how coordination breaks down under real conditions. The experts you mentioned have studied transportation. I've lived it." The hearing room falls silent as Kowalski continues. "Your safety protocols are designed to prevent accidents that don't happen while ignoring problems that kill drivers every day. Convoy operations cause chain reaction collisions when lead trucks encounter obstacles. Following distances that look safe on paper become deadly when 20 vehicles travel in formation. Radio silence that preserves military-style discipline prevents the communication that could save lives." Representative Morrison attempts to discredit Kowalski's testimony by citing statistics about convoy safety records, but the numbers backfire. Continuous flow operations have achieved 0 accidents across thousands of miles, while comparable convoy movements show consistent casualty rates. The data supports innovation over tradition. Dr. Elizabeth Ramsey, transportation safety researcher from MIT, provides expert testimony that validates Kowalski's empirical observations with scientific analysis. Her computer simulations demonstrate that continuous flow systems distribute risk across individual vehicles rather than concentrating vulnerability in formation flying. The mathematical models confirm what practical experience discovered through trial and error. The congressional hearing concludes without definitive resolution, but the testimony creates momentum for regulatory reform that accommodates proven innovations rather than prohibiting them. Transportation Department officials receive directives to develop new safety standards that evaluate results rather than compliance with outdated procedures. The immediate impact transforms ACE Transportation from regional trucking company into national logistics consultant. Construction firms across the country request continuous flow services for projects that seemed impossible under conventional transportation constraints. The method that saved the Willis Tower delivery becomes the foundation for handling oversized loads that traditional convoy systems cannot manage efficiently. International attention accelerates when the Canadian Transport Authority invites Kowalski to demonstrate continuous flow operations for potential adoption in cross-border freight movements. The method's success in Detroit-Chicago deliveries suggests applications for transcontinental shipments that cross multiple jurisdictions and regulatory environments. The demonstration project involves moving mining equipment from Ontario to Alberta, a journey that typically requires weeks of coordination between provincial authorities, railway companies, and trucking firms. Conventional methods demand permits, escort vehicles, and predetermined routes that restrict movement to specific schedules. Continuous flow operations promise to reduce transit time while maintaining safety standards. The Canadian trial begins April 15th with 12 specialized heavy haul trucks carrying oversized mining components. Each load exceeds normal weight limits and requires careful coordination to avoid infrastructure damage. Traditional convoy methods would bunch these vehicles together, creating traffic disruptions and concentrating risk in formation movements. Kowalski's adaptation for heavy haul operations modifies continuous flow principles to accommodate unique challenges of oversized loads. Individual trucks maintain greater spacing to allow emergency stopping distances. Radio communication includes infrastructure monitoring to prevent bridge overloads or road surface damage. Speed calculations factor in load dynamics that differ significantly from standard freight operations. The results exceed expectations. 12 trucks complete the Ontario-Alberta journey in 63 hours, compared to typical transit times of 8 to 10 days using conventional heavy-haul methods. Zero infrastructure damage occurs despite carrying loads that strain highway engineering limits. Provincial authorities report minimal traffic disruption compared to traditional oversized convoy movements. The Canadian success attracts attention from mining companies worldwide. Australian mineral extraction firms request similar services for moving equipment across continental distances where transportation costs determine project viability. South American copper producers investigate whether continuous flow methods can reduce shipping expenses that make remote mining operations economically marginal. The method's expansion into specialized applications reveals principles that extend beyond trucking into broader logistics optimization. Continuous flow thinking applies to pipeline operations, railway scheduling, and maritime shipping coordination. The insights that revolutionize steel delivery become foundational concepts for integrated transportation systems. Academic institutions establish research programs studying continuous flow dynamics as a new branch of operations research. The University of Chicago creates the Kowalski Institute for Transportation Innovation, dedicated to advancing the mathematical understanding of distributed logistics systems. Graduate students analyze traffic flow data to identify optimization principles that practicing drivers discovered intuitively. Harold Kowalski never sought fame or recognition for revolutionizing American freight transportation. After testifying before Congress and establishing the principles that would reshape logistics worldwide, he quietly returned to driving trucks. The man who proved that impossible deadlines could be met through innovative thinking spent his final years training the next generation of drivers in continuous flow methods. When he died in 1987 at age 66, his obituary in the Detroit Free Press mentioned his role in the Willis Tower delivery in a single paragraph. But every truck on American highways today moves according to principles he discovered during 8 desperate days in March 1962. Sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with one person refusing to accept that something cannot be idone.